Hi, this is Mac from Mac's List. Before we start the show, I want to let you know about my new book, Land Your Dream Job Anywhere. I've been helping job seekers find meaningful, well-paying work since 2001, and now I put all my best advice into one easy-to-use guide. My book shows you how to make your resume stand out in a stack of applications, where you can find the hidden jobs that never get posted, and what you need to do to ace your next job interview. Get the first chapter now for free. Visit maxlist.org/anywhere. This is Find Your Dream Job, the podcast that helps you get hired, have the career you want, and make a difference in life. I'm Mac Pritchard, your host and publisher of Mac's List. I'm joined by my co-hosts, Ben Forstag, Becky Thomas, and Jessica Black from the Mac's List team. This week, we're talking about what's hot and what's not in resumes. Your resume is probably the most important document you use when you look for your next job. And it also offers one of your best opportunities to tell your story and what you can do for an employer. Our guest expert this week is Jacqui Barrett-Poindexter. She's written resumes that have helped thousands of people get the jobs they want. Jacqui says she sees 6 new trends in resumes that appeal to employers. She's also identified 6 things you need to stop doing in your resume. Jacqui and I talk about her list, what's hot and what's not in resumes, later in the show. Whatever your age, you know the economy has changed in the last generation. With a few exceptions, the traditional model of lifetime employment with a large organization doesn't exist anymore. Ben has a book recommended by listener Terry Russell. It shows what job search strategies work best in today's economy. Ben will tell us more in a moment. Is it still worthwhile to drop off your resume at an office where you want to work? Or is there a more modern tactic to get your name in front of a hiring manager? That's our question of the week. It comes from listener Marcia Callahan from Portland, Oregon. Becky offers her advice in a moment. As always, let's start our show by checking in with the Mac's List team. We hear a lot about resumes from the Mac's List community, and every year there are new ideas about how best to do your resume and candidly what you need to stop doing. As you all think about resumes, what's one thing you think people should start doing when they write the resume, and what should they stop doing? Becky, you want to go first?
Sure. I've got one to start doing. I think it's a sort of a no-brainer for a lot of folks, but I see a lot of resumes where people don't include some sort of profile or summary or objective statement at the beginning of their resume. And I think that you need to really think like a hiring manager with a stack of resumes and what's like the first impression that you want to give with your resume. And that summary section or that profile, that 2 sentences that you say, here's who I am and here's what I do and here's what I can do for you is just really powerful. And a lot of people aren't doing it. So that's one thing that people should definitely be doing.
I'm going to jump in here.
Okay.
Because I had something that I was going to say you should stop doing, which is stop putting an objective statement in the resume.
All right. Uh-oh.
It's a big controversial. There's a lot of back and forth.
Like 1 versus 2 pages.
I think it's a good idea to like have a really well thought out like professional summary or value statement or elevator pitch or whatever you want to call it up at the top of your resume. But so many people will put something that's frankly pretty mundane up there. It's like, my objective is to get a job at a company that does X, Y, and Z.
Oh, yeah. Well,
and that's like, yeah, I know that's your objective. That's why you're sending me your resume. And so if you're going to do that, I would just say like it really has to be lights out in terms of quality and impact and the value it's adding to the resume. If it's just repeating something that anyone could intuit themselves or is repeated somewhere else in your resume, then it's just taking up space.
But even if it summarizes what your deal is in the beginning, isn't that still worthwhile? Because, when someone just looks at a resume cold, not knowing that person at all, I don't want to just be like, oh, okay, here's where you went to school or here's your last job that you had. That doesn't give me any information right off the bat.
Yeah, no, I think it just has to be really killer content, as they would say. And so I think to like Jessica's resume, and I think this is on your resume, you know, like if you have like a great elevator pitch or like this is who I am in one sentence, like use it. And Jessica's was something like I reduce chaos to help other people shine. And like that gets your attention.
I streamline chaos so others can shine.
Yeah.
So
that's my headline.
Nice.
So it like really like it captures your attention, makes you want to read more.
Yeah.
But you know, if you read a resume where the first line is like, I am looking for a job.
Okay.
There's nothing too exciting there for me to want to read more about that.
That's a good point. So make sure that summary, that whatever it is, that intro to you is something that's going to stand out and is really going to tell the employer like what makes you different.
And
the great minds have met here, Becky.
Yeah, we're good.
Yes, it's great. And also I would add to that that if you, like, I don't think anybody should lose sleep trying to figure out what their headline is. It should be something that comes fairly naturally of, you know, combining your skills and your strengths all into, you know, one sentence of here's who I am. But if you don't have that, that's no big deal. It's okay. And you can still, you know, showcase other things in your resume to still stand out.
So are you saying no intro, no summary?
I'm not taking a side.
Okay. Whatever, that's fine.
Okay. Well, I like your emphasis on what you can do for the employer.
Yeah, that's
I
important.
Think that wherever you can make that point, whether it's an objective statement on your resume, in your cover letter, on your LinkedIn profile, or in your interview, you're just going to stand out head and shoulders above other candidates. Jessica, what about you? Is there something you recommend people stop doing or start doing with a resume?
I don't have anything that I feel really passionately about of that I, you know, will tell everybody about that type of thing. But I do think that we've talked about it before on our show about your schooling, your work. Sorry, not your work experience, but your school education experience.
Education. Yeah.
That was difficult to get out, but that you don't necessarily need to add your year that you graduated, and unless you're, you know, just like right out of college, and that becomes really relevant right out of college. But after that, I think that if you have, you know, 5 years of work experience, then you don't necessarily need to have your year that you graduated on there. I mean, I still have mine on there, but I also don't think it hinders that much. I don't know. I guess, again, I'm not that passionate about it, so I don't have anything to stop doing.
Okay, good. And Ben, do you have something you would add to the list?
So I'll start this off with a caveat that you ask any two resume coaches what their opinions are, and you'll probably get 4 different answers.
Yeah, see, that's where it's hard for me. There's so many conflicting words of advice, and I think it's best to just do what's best for you.
Yeah, I mean, it's everyone's preference, right? The one thing I would encourage people to do is break out of the mold of thinking that work experience is only professional work experience. In fact, I would even take the word, you know, work off of that section and just call it experience or professional experience, because there's so many things that we do outside of the formal 9 to 5 or picking up a paycheck that can contribute to your marketability as a job seeker. So including volunteer experiences and things like that inside that quote professional experience field. I think that's a really strong thing a lot of candidates do.
Yeah. Good. And I like that. I would also add to the list for me, I think including your LinkedIn profile, a URL to it in your resume is going to help you tell your story further, because for readers who want to learn more, being able to find your LinkedIn page is going to give them the opportunity to do that. And it's especially useful if you have a somewhat common name. Sometimes it can be hard, particularly in a big market, because of your name, for people to figure out exactly who you are on LinkedIn.
I would just add to that, make sure you have a personalized URL for your LinkedIn, because a lot of people don't. It's just like a bunch of random numbers. So make sure you've got that.
That's a great tip, because you can do that for free. And I think LinkedIn may assign you those random numbers, but do I have it right, Becky? You can.
Yeah, you can go in and edit it.
Yeah, you can personalize it.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, when you're editing your profile.
Good. All right. Well, we're going to talk more about this, because I know that Jacqui, our guest this week, speaks to a lot of employers, and she is a resume writer and is in touch with both employers and candidates regularly, and is up to speed on what the current trends are. But before we do that, let's turn to you, Ben, because you're out there every week searching the nooks and crannies of the internet, looking for tools, books, and websites our listeners can use in a job search or career. So what have you uncovered for us this week?
This week I want to talk about a book I just finished, actually last night, and it's called Down and Out in the New Economy, How People Find or Don't Find Work Today. And it's by an author named Alana Gershon. She's an anthropologist at the University of Indiana. And before I start off, I should actually give a hat tip to one of our listeners, Russell Terry, who suggested this book for me. Russell and I chat over Twitter a lot, and he thought this would be a good find for me. So thank you, Russell. So at its heart, this is actually not a book about looking for work. It's a book about job search advice, and specifically what works and what doesn't in the new economy. You know, as we all know, there are countless books and websites and groups and events and coaches and podcasts, all focused on how to find work. And Gershon noticed that a lot of the advice from these sources was either presented as like unquestioned truth. This is absolutely true in all cases, or it tended to be contradictory, where just as we mentioned, you know, one resume coach would say one thing and another one would say the complete opposite. So she wanted to figure out what really worked in our economy these days. And so she spent a year interviewing job seekers and hiring managers and all kinds of people in the spectrum of looking for work in the San Francisco Bay Area. And this book documents her findings on the most effective strategies for connecting people to employers.
So I got to ask, what did she find, and how does she know that these things aren't controversial, that there aren't people that disagree about her findings?
Well, I think like there's always going to be some controversy no matter what. You know, I say the sky's blue and you're going to find someone who's going to tell me it's not, right? But, you know, based on her findings and her discussions with job seekers and what they were being told by coaches and clinics and things like that, and then talking with hiring managers about like what was actually important when you made this decision, she came up with a list of things that worked. And regular listeners of the show, these answers are not going to be like really out of this world. It's pretty anticlimactic. Some of her big takeaways are things that we talk about pretty regularly. So, you know, the importance of building a professional network and why you need to spend less time looking at online job listings and why you need to focus on a small number of professional goals instead of casting a really wide net. None of this is really revolutionary stuff, but what makes Gershon's book interesting is how she frames the job search process in the modern economy. So, you know, we all know the economy has changed a lot in the last 30 years. And Gershon argues that these structural changes have created a psychological shift in how people view their relationship to work and to their employers. So in the past, people kind of viewed their relationship to an employer as a kind of rental agreement that, you know, you rented your labor out from 9 to 5 to your employer, and then the rest of the day was your own. You got to do whatever you wanted, and the employer had no sway or influence on that. Nowadays, things are different, and people view themselves much more like individual businesses, and their relationship with the employer is structured like an arrangement between two business enterprises. And you see this a lot in how people talk about branding. Like we talk about personal branding, and everyone needs to be branded the same way a business needs to be branded, because like you're this vendor who's selling your services to different businesses on short-term arrangements, even if it might be a formal 9 to 5 job. The mentality of this has shifted. So this means like less stability, weaker commitment between the employer and the employees, and in general, shorter terms of employment. So it's this really interesting shift there. And one of the things she talked about was the impact of what this has done to our lives as people and as employees. And there's frankly some sobering stuff. She says, you know, people are working more hours today than they did 10 years ago or 20 years ago or 30 years ago, because it's no longer I'm renting my work to you for a few hours. It's like you are buying me wholesale, and I'm going to work all night for you and all day, and I'm available 24 hours a day. And you see this from the, you know, high-priced white-collar jobs all the way down to minimum wage labor. It's just an odd trend, a saddening trend, I think. And a lot of the techniques that people have used to find jobs in this new economy frankly don't really work anymore. And one she's particularly down on is the idea of branding itself. She says that's not terribly effective, but it's something that makes people feel like they have more control than they actually do in the job search process.
Was there one tip in the book that she recommended above all others that people could follow to get their next job?
Networking.
Okay.
I mean, it's who you know, and that's always going to help you. Her tip was that when you try to kind of project a fake persona on yourself through kind of marketing and branding yourself, she says it doesn't really work with employers. They don't think about your brand when they make the hiring decision. What they think about is like, do I know and trust this person? And so it's all about having that close connection or having that in-person connection with someone.
I think that people who do work in branding and marketing might push back and say, well, of course, inauthentic branding isn't going to work. It has to be real. What does she still not think it's as effective as other techniques, even when it's authentic? Yeah,
and my pushback here would be on the author would be branding probably works, but on a much more subtle level than someone's conscious saying, like, Becky's got a great brand, I'm going to hire her. The brand really reinforces everything else about Becky that I might like, that she's a good worker. She's got the right kind of experience. She's got the right kind of attitude.
Go on. Oh, sorry.
Becky doesn't know how to use a microphone.
I was just saying, yes, continue.
No, and so I think it's like this very subtle influence that just keeps kind of whispering in people's ear about you. And so it might not be the kind of thing an employer looks back on and says, like, I hired Becky because of her brand, but it does feed into some of the things that do drive hiring decisions.
Great. Well, thank you, Ben. I appreciate that. And thank you, Russell, for your recommendation. If, like Russell, you have a suggestion for Ben, please write him, and we'd love to share your idea on the show. Ben's address is ben@maxlist.org. Now let's turn to you, our listeners, and Becky Thomas joins us to answer one of your questions. What's in the mailbag this week, Becky?
So we've got an email question from Marcia Callahan, and she's from Portland, Oregon. So Marcia writes, I am returning to the workforce after a long time off. It used to be that you would take your resume around in person to places you wanted to work, but I know that's not the case anymore. What is the best way to submit a resume to a place of employment to be able to make an impression and improve your chances of getting an interview? Thanks, Marcia. This is a good question. I think that that sort of in-person contact is still valuable, even though people may not be bringing in their resumes to an office like they used to. So instead of showing up at that office with your resume, so it's sort of best practice now to introduce yourself to an individual at the place you want to work and try to develop a personal connection and create some inroads within that company. That way, when you do submit your resume, you've got a personal connection that you can use to help you get an interview and better chance of getting the job. So a few tips on this, and we talk about this a lot on the podcast and the blog, so we can include some links in the show notes too. But a couple tips here. So first, you would sort of look to use your existing network. So ask your contacts about the company that you're targeting that you want to work for. See if they know anyone there, or perhaps they work there or have worked there in the past. Try to get those connections so that you can get introduced to somebody who works there currently. Someone who is in a hiring position would be awesome, but just sort of look for somebody who's in the area, in the field that you want to be working in within that company. LinkedIn is a great resource, obviously, for this, to do that research and target your asks that way. And then once you sort of get a person at the company that you want to talk to, go the informational interview route. So approach them with a clear, concise question like, I just want to get to know this area within your company, and this is my expertise, and I'm sort of moving into this area, or whatever your situation may be. But just be clear about what you want to talk to them about. Also sort of limiting the time that you want to talk to them, and then be flexible, sort of work around their schedule and meeting time and place. Have a chat with them. As far as getting your resume in, I would suggest sending your resume as an attachment in an email request if you are requesting an informational interview with someone there. Then they'll have it. Some folks will also ask for those, and they'll review your resume before meeting with you, which is awesome. If not, definitely include it in a follow-up email with that person, just being like, hey, here's my resume. I'm going to be, if you are applying for a specific position, let them know. And, if you had a good conversation and a good connection, it's totally fine to ask them, I'd love a referral, or I'd love it if you put in a good word for me, that kind of thing. So that sort of in-person connection is sort of the way to go, I would say, in our sort of modern job search economy where relationships are really important. Do you guys have any other thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't that long ago when you could like walk around business to business and drop off your resume.
Yeah, I remember that too.
Yeah, I mean, I think my first professional job out of college, like I tried to do that, like go to the HR department and physically hand them a resume for a position I didn't even know was open. But I think you're right. It's more of an informal way of doing that now. So reaching out to existing employees or the HR folks and saying, can I have an informational interview with you so I could talk a little bit about my interests and where that might align with the company. Right. And I think the other piece here is just letting people know that you're looking for work, and you don't need to even necessarily be making an ask to folks, just making it clear, like, I'm looking for work. This is the kind of work I'm looking to do. Yep. And if you know any leads or any opportunities, I'd really appreciate you letting me know about those. And I think that accomplishes the same thing as canvassing employers with your resume.
Jessica, do you have some thoughts on this?
You guys did a great job. I don't have anything else to add, although I did just get a phone call a couple weeks ago from someone who sent a voicemail saying he had just graduated from college and was looking for a job and if we had any positions available. And I just thought that was so nice to hear, because people just don't do that anymore. It was just so quaint and wonderful to have somebody still be following through on those like traditional models. And I called and let him know, here's some other ways to go about this, because that's really not done that way very much anymore. But I really appreciate you taking the initiative, because it's, scary to do it that way, especially in this time in our lives where you don't do a lot of especially you don't make phone calls anymore, especially young. That's kind of why I thought it was so sweet, was because a young person making a phone call and doing it over. I mean, I'm sure we weren't the only ones. So he was doing it over and over and over. And I thought that was just, he's going to land on his feet because he's taking the initiative and doing all those steps. But
he's tenacious. I like that.
Yeah. So I thought that was great, but you just don't, it's just not done anymore, So it was interesting.
Yeah, I like Marsha's focus here on a company and knowing where she wants to go. And most hiring decisions are made by people who come in through the back door. And so everything you outlined, Becky, will let her do that. And to your point, Jessica, I love the initiative that she's showing. So many people know they want to work at a company or nonprofit, or they're interested in opportunities there, but they wait for something to pop up on a job board or a website. Yep. And Marsha's not waiting. She wants to get out and start connecting with people. So kudos to her.
Yeah, and I do think that if she does like the traditional physical paper model of a resume, when she does have those informational interviews, I think that would be a great time to do the resume over in that type of scenario, if that's still the format that she wants to go through.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good. Cool. Well, thank you all. Thank you, Becky, and thank you, Marsha, for your question. If you have a question for Becky, please email her. Her address is Becky, BECKY, @maxlist.org. You can also call her listener line. That number is 716-JOB-TALK. Or you can tweet us, and Becky keeps a careful eye on the MaxList Twitter account. Our handle is @MaxList. That's MACS_LIST. Now, if we use your question on the show, we'll send you a copy of Land Your Dream Job Anywhere. We're dropping Marsha's copy in the mail this week, and we'd love to send you one too. So send us a question. We'll be back in just a moment, and when we return, I'll talk with this week's guest expert, Jacqui Barrett-Poindexter, about what's hot and what's not in resumes. Most people struggle with job hunting. The reason is simple. Most of us learn the nuts and bolts of looking for work by trial and error. That's why I produce this podcast, to help you master the skills you need to find a great job. It's also why I wrote my new book, Land Your Dream Job Anywhere. For 15 years at MaxList, I've helped people in Portland, Oregon find meaningful, well-paying, and rewarding jobs that they love. Now, I put all of my job hunting secrets in one book that can help you no matter where you live. You'll learn how to get clear about your career goals, find hidden jobs that never get posted, and ace your next job interview. For more information and to download the first chapter for free, visit maxlist.org/anywhere. Now let's turn to this week's guest expert, Jacqui Barrett-Poindexter. Jacqui Barrett-Poindexter owns and operates CareerTrend.net. She's one of just 50 master resume writers in the United States. Jacqui's crafted more than 1,500 career stories. She uses her bachelor's degree in writing and journalism to apply a reporter's eye to careers. She joins us today from Gordonsville, Texas. Jacqui, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you, Mac.
Now, you've seen and written thousands of resumes, and earlier this year you put together a list of trends in resumes, what's hot and what's not. I'd love to go through those 6 trends and share those with our listeners. How does that sound?
That sounds great.
All right, terrific. Number 1 on your hot list, focus. Jacqui, why does focus matter so much?
A couple of reasons. One of the main reasons is because we do live in such a stimulated world right now, and especially digitally, and most of the resumes are read that way online. And so we want to focus in so that we make it quick and easy for the reader to establish focus, get to what they need initially in a skimmable format, and let them move on either to say yes or no to furthering their interest.
Okay, so keep it focused, but the opposite, and this is the first item on your what's not list, is the opposite of focus. And I think you talk about brain dumping here. What are you getting at here, Jacqui?
Often people will brain dump by laying out everything they've done forever, whether they've been in the workforce for 5 years, 15 years, or even just out of school. They just want to tell too much about what they do, their duties, their responsibilities, every little thing. And so it becomes a quagmire for the reader, but it also doesn't focus in on the reader's needs. So if the reader is hiring for a sales rep in a particular area, if you're talking about what you did in an administrative or operations role, and it will lose focus quickly. So you have to really hone in on what they're looking for and get their interest that you're speaking to their needs.
Okay, so keep it focused and think about the employer's needs. Number 2 on your hot list is what's in it for the employers. Tell us more about why that matters, Jacqui.
Sure. So an employer is usually hiring because they have a specific need. They have something, either someone has resigned or maybe new problems, new growth, new situations have arisen where they need to hire and bring in someone to hit the ground running. So you want to make sure that you bring in how you're going to fill that gap. And maybe they need more profitability, or their talent pool has become very weak and they need someone to go in and bolster that. And you want to know what those problems are as best you can, and by doing your research and bring that in and show that you have done that before and give them proof that you can do it again.
So talk about your accomplishments for past employers, but through kind of it sounds like a strategic lens. Am I getting that right, Jacqui, about thinking about the employer's needs?
The strategic lens is very important, and some of it is you can only find out so much about their areas of need, and some of it is your best guess based on your strategic insights from your past experience, plus your insights about the market and the economy, and you might jolt them with some interest in your areas of achievement that they hadn't even realized they were looking for until you bring that up. So you're owning those achievements and really bringing them out, shining a light, and then shining also, of course, how you are a team player and some of the soft skills. Now,
number 2 on your not hot list kind of surprised me. You put me. Isn't a resume really about us and our careers? So isn't it about the applicant in the end?
It is. So you want to make sure that is part of it, that you don't want to get so focused on yourself that you look like you're an island and that you're not working with others. You're also there to lift the careers of others that are around you. So whether you're reporting, you have people reporting to you, or even those who are in direct relationships that you have an opportunity to to do that to help people advance their careers. So it's kind of a blend, but you don't want to do that so much that you lose the impact of what you can do as an individual contributor or an individual leader or manager.
So it sounds like look for ways to show that you play well with others and you're part of a team, but also don't minimize your own accomplishments and how your role helped that team and the company prosper and succeed.
Yes.
Now, we're almost halfway through your list. Number one three, Jacqui, on the hot list was to show that we're creative in problem solving. Tell us more about how to do this and why it matters to employers.
I think showing that you can avert situations that may be coming down the pike, maybe no one else around you has spoken up about or even seen, but something specific in your background, whether you're an engineer or an analytical problem solver in another area, or you just have a certain experience that lends you to have an intuition about certain issues that are on the horizon. I think showing where you've come forward and been able to, as the example on this article, is, you might have saved millions or thousands or even hundreds depending of dollars in bleeding because you spoke up and you were capable of thinking through critically these situations. And it can also be things to do with more of a soft skill where you've got different silos in an organization that aren't speaking together, and how you were able to use your relationship building skills to bridge that. And that brings people together and maybe the development of a product or some other scenario that you've been able to advance forward that helps the company to, again, grow revenue or build profits or increase their market share in another part of the country or even the world.
Being able to show that matters. Now, on your not hot list was, and this, like me, kind of surprised me, was showing bottom line results on a resume is no longer hot. So tell me about the difference here, Jacqui, between your point a moment ago about showing that you're a problem solver, but why isn't it also important to show the bottom line results that you produce for a company?
They're both important. So measurable results are important and the bottom line. But if the resume is just peppered with those, maybe 3 or 4 or 5 bullets, and under a position description with just the bottom line, the writer or the job seeker has cut it so tight and so lean that all you see is 50% and 30% and 500,000 and 200 or whatever the numbers are. But there's really no context around how they got to that, which gives that emotional appeal. You describe how you had to convince a group of leaders or a board of directors to move forward on something that they didn't think was important. And that's how you got to that final number. You show through your context and your story how you overcame certain hurdles to get to that number. That's what I'm talking about there. So it's not one over the other. It's blending the two and making sure it's not such a lean and mean resume that we're just talking about numbers.
Yeah, I like your point a lot because numbers are important and you've got to be able to document accomplishments, but you got to tell a story too. And you mentioned a moment ago how engaging and emotionally engaging stories can be and how they can. And I've certainly seen that in other work I've done in my career. And I also run a public relations company. And
yes,
there's a fellow I've worked with who teaches a workshop on storytelling and what a difference it can make. And he focuses on public policy, but he has a great point. He says, nobody ever marched on Washington because of great data. It's a story that inspires people and compels them to action. And do you see something similar there in hiring too, Jacqui, in terms of the power of storytelling?
Yes, I can think of a couple of clients. One he was an IT, an information technology leader, and he was looking to get into what was a very hot company. And the resume had such strong stories going on. I mean, that the recruiting executive who brought him in said, it was almost so much, so emotionally kind of impactful that I was kind of taken aback, but I had to talk to you. So so that was a good reinforcement that, it may be uncomfortable too. I think that brings up sometimes the storytelling and being a little more getting into these not just details, but what we were just talking about, the stories can feel a little bit out of one's comfort zone. They don't think that's right, for their resume, because it should be so kind of dry and numbers driven, but it really is more than that. And it does work.
I love that, because it's again, people hire people, and stories are a great way of engaging others. Number 4 on your hot list for resume writers is leadership. And why, Jacqui, is it important to show leadership on a resume?
Everyone has some sort of leadership, even if it's just self-leadership or being able to quietly lead, by example. And I think if you can display that somehow in your resume, whatever portion of your career you're at, whether you're early or mid or late, you can give yourself an edge, because it's not saying that I want to go in and be the boss of everyone, because we all know that good leaders are good servants, taking care of the people around them and making sure everyone's empowered and also equipped to do their jobs. And I think you can show that as a team member, as a team leader, as an individual in an office or an organization where you're willing to display, an ability to help others push forward and equip them with the right tools responsibly.
And on your not hot list is followership.
Yeah.
And this one, I wondered about, because don't leaders need followers too? Aren't employers looking for people who are good followers?
So it is vital to show that, especially if you're being hired by someone who's going to be giving you quite a bit of direction, and you want to be able to show that you're not going to be stubborn. So you want to show that, but you also want to show that if the same leadership needs you to take initiative and run with it, maybe because of different scenarios where the leader can only get you started, and they need someone who can then lead at a different level below that. But also, when you have a growing company, and hopefully you're going to become a part of a company that's not stagnant, then there are going to be periods where the leader may have more than they can take on, and they need another leader that may not be an appointed leader, but has leadership qualities, is to take things off of their shoulders when they may feel overwhelmed.
No, that makes great sense. Number 5 on your what's hot list is a career portfolio. And tell us about career portfolios. What are they, and why do they matter?
When I think of a career portfolio now, in current trends, I automatically think of a resume, a cover letter, and LinkedIn, and now an elevator pitch. And even if elevator pitches are a little bit, that term is a little dated, it gets the point across. But those kind of pieces are really essential documents and messaging that if someone has those on hand, then I think they're ready to hit the ground running, and then they can kind of add to it later as needed. LinkedIn is, most people have heard of, but it's a nice adjunct to the resume. It can complement it. It can extend upon it. It can tell some of the same things in a different way. It can give you a more narrative opportunity in the summary section. So I think that that probably is a must-have these days in your portfolio. And then the elevator pitch is just a nice, concise, something that you have on hand, maybe even 2 or 3 elevator pitches that you use depending on the situation, where you want to give a quick snapshot when you're talking to someone on the phone or in the hallway or at a networking event, or just casually who has asked who you are and what you're trying to look for, what you're trying to do in your career, what you're aspiring for.
So in order to really give a complete picture and knowing also too that people are going to look for you in different places,
you want to make sure that you have at your ready different ways you can articulate what you do, whether it's pointing them to your LinkedIn, even an about.me page. And I don't want to go on, bring out too many different sources, but as you and I both know, there's so many different ways we can be present on the internet with different venues and have profiles that are professional and clean and easy for people to get to you too, because everyone communicates differently. Even Pinterest, Instagram, all of these areas might be ways for someone building their career to have consistent messaging that people can find you and then get back to you. And then you should then have, because I'm a resume expert and I know the value of it, you should have some sorts of pieces of resume material that maybe you can roll out, whether you start with a summary or an elevator pitch and follow on with something meatier.
So let's go to the 6 items on your list. What's hot is, you said, value-focused resumes. Let's talk about those. But also on the what's not hot list is just using facts on resumes. Tell us, what is a value-focused resume and why should we rely on facts alone to tell our story on our resume?
Again, looking at a target audience, and that will help guide what you're, how to communicate values or when to. I'm thinking even of some chief financial executive level clients I've worked with in the past year or so, and one who really wanted to speak to his values more as a leader and in integrity as a leader. We really showcased that in a level beyond just more of a, what might have been a conservative financial executive resume. We brought in these areas of leadership values.
Well, terrific. Well, this has been really helpful, Jacqui. Now tell us, what's next for you?
I have fairly recently started to roll out what I call a starter kit. And with that starter kit, it's a low-cost entry to test out my resume service. This is kind of a do-it-yourself. And so I just wanted to share that I have that. And, I can find more information on my website.
Terrific. And we'll be sure to include a link to that service in the show notes for the episode. I know people can also, besides visiting your website, which is careertrend.net, they can also find you, Jacqui, on Twitter, and your Twitter handle is @ValueIntoWords. That's 4 words, @ValueIntoWords. And we'll include links to your Twitter account and your website in the show notes. Jacqui, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Mac. I enjoyed it.
All right, we're back in the Max List studio with Becky, Ben, and Jessica. So what are your reactions to my conversation with Jacqui? What were some key points you took away? Becky, you want to go first?
Sure. Yeah, I really liked what she was saying about storytelling. The fact that you can sort of insert your personal story, to an extent. Like, you can tell your story and not just have your resume be all about the numbers and be very dry, but that you can sort of play into that emotional element of people hiring people, like you said, and that can really give you sort of a heads up on the competition. That you have like a clear sort of story of who you are as a professional and what you offer, and you can get that story across. That's really going to help you. So I really like what she was saying about that.
Yeah, and I love the engagement that happens when we tell stories and how we draw people in.
Totally.
Yeah, and I know all of us, when we're looking for work, struggle with getting the attention of hiring managers, and telling a story is one of the best ways to do that. Mm-hmm. Ben, what are your thoughts?
I think, building off of that, one of the themes that runs through all of her points was this idea of balance, right? Like, that you don't want to take the ultimate approach in any one of these things. So so often we tell people, put numbers on your resume, quantify your results. And that's good in general, but if you go overboard with it, it's not good. And so you have to find this right balance between showing accomplishments and quantifying accomplishments, but also still coming across as a real human being who's got a story, who's got an interesting career narrative, who people might want to work with. And so I don't have the secret sauce here of where that balance is, but clearly one of the things she brings out is that you have to find that beautiful middle ground there. And I think that's a trial and error process for most people.
Yeah, I think sometimes we hope, just to make the job go faster, that there's some template that we can just follow and plug in words and our resume will be done. I mean, that one and done that you talked about. And there's more art to it than science. And I see you nodding, Jessica. What thoughts do you have?
Yeah, both of those that you both just mentioned about it was interesting to hear about the bottom line not being the way to go anymore, or this focus on numbers and quantifying your accomplishments, because I feel like that was a big trend for a long time. That was sort of the push of make sure that that's all you should focus on, is making sure that you have numbers to put on your resume of what you've done. And I think that is a really good point to, yes, showcase what you've done, but also, like you all said, tell the story and focus on the other things that you've done. I also liked what she mentioned about the leadership of showing that you can take initiative in different ways in solving problems and all of that stuff. So and there's good ways to do that that's outside of just quantifying what you've brought the business. So I think that's really good.
Her point about data alone not being enough was interesting, because you're right. I hear for so long resumes were about duties and responsibilities. Now there's a focus, and I think it's proper on accomplishments and having numbers to support those accomplishments. But you can, as she said, take the pendulum too far. You got to have a story as well. That's right. Yeah. And I think that I think it can be stressful for people who aren't managing a budget, or aren't doing the things that have a number associated with it can be really stressful to try to figure out what to put on your resume that's a quantifiable accomplishment. And so I think that that's a really nice way to know that it's okay to not have numbers, or that you don't have to slash a budget by 10% or whatever. It can be something else that also creates that value. Well, terrific. Well, thank you all. And thank you, our listeners, for joining us today for this episode of Find Your Dream Job. If you like what you hear, please sign up for our free weekly newsletter. These are our show notes. And in every issue, we give you the key points of that week's episode. We also include links to all the resources mentioned, and you get a transcript of the full show. If you subscribe to the newsletter now, we'll send you our new guide, the Top Career Podcasts of 2017. Discover all the podcasts that can help you find a great job and build the career you want. Get your free newsletter and career podcast guide today. Go to maxlist.org/podcast. And join us next Wednesday when our special guest will be Sherry Thomas. She'll explain how to bounce back after a layoff. Until next time, thanks for letting us help you find your dream job.